Hey, editing Eric here. I did just now see, while editing this, that Comic Drake just uploaded a, very similar video. Please rest assured, I have been working on slash procrastinating this video for like 2 months. So, I'm not like trying to piggyback off of him or anything. Okay. Uh, Bye. Hi, my name is Eric. Welcome back to Eric's Vids. Today we're going to be talking about Spider-Gwen. Now, Spider-Gwen is a fascinating character in the large part because she's somewhat of a distillation of the life cycle of comic book characters as a whole. Let me explain. Spider-Gwen debuted in Edge of Spider-Verse number 2 as part of the original Spider-Verse event in 2014. Side note, I actually still have a first print copy of Edge of Spider-Verse number 2, and while it's not in mint condition, it is still one of the most prized comics in my collection. While many what-if iterations of Spider-Man cast members gaining powers had very simple concepts that fit very neatly into offshoots of 616 canon, Jason Latour and Robbie Rodriguez did something a little different with the Earth 65 interpretation of Gwen. The original 616 version of Gwen was a little stagnant right before her death, and if she were directly translated to the modern day, she would be a Karen that would throw a fit if a fast food worker got her order wrong. I'm sorry, you may not want to hear it, but that's the truth. Latour wasn't sure what to do with his version of Gwen at first, but when the Spider Office at the time gave him a pre-approved list of Spidey characters he could make alternate universe versions of, he found himself drawn to Gwen. Quote, "It was clear to me pretty quickly that I didn't know anything about Gwen Stacy except that she was a victim. I'm not saying that's how Gary Conway and Stan Lee wanted to treat her at all. It's just sort of what happened in the years since. As a white male, I've read my story 1,000 times. As a creator, it's become boring to me. I really only meant to write this one little story that I thought might mean something to someone." Instead, Latour and Rodriguez tried to capture more of a contemporary energy of modern teenagehood and rebellion. They made Gwen into a punk rock drummer, using her energy as a drummer to match the bombastic energy she would have as Spider-Woman. Little did Latour and Rodriguez know, that little story would become anything but. Gwen became the breakout star of the original Spider-Verse event, a title where interdimensional spider vampires hunted down alternate reality mystical spider totems so they could steal their life force. Yeah, the movie definitely took a different direction for the better. Gwen's popularity no doubt had a lot to do with the fucking sick costume design. Fan artists and cosplayers clamored to recreate this modern, sleek take on the Spider-Man suit, and can you blame them? The more minimalist take on Spider-Man's iconography mixed with the hood made a very timely aesthetic for the year of 2014. Jesus Christ, this came out almost a decade ago. This was the age of the modernized superhero suit, with the most direct comparison at the time being the controversial Burnside suit for Batgirl's equally, if not more so, controversial New 52 title, Batgirl of Burnside. I'm not going to derail this video with a rant about Barbara Gordon as Oracle versus her as Batgirl. That's a video for another day. Hi, editing Eric here. I somehow never talked about Emma Stone's Gwen in the Amazing Spider-Man movies and how that undoubtedly influenced Spider-Gwen's popularity in the comics and the original script, so I'm gonna do that now so I can use Emma Stone in the thumbnail. Love them or hate them, the Amazing Spider-Man movies undoubtedly reinjected Gwen into the cultural consciousness and helped form the modern conception of Gwen's personality traits and characteristics, even if her portrayal of Gwen feels like halfway between Gwen and MJ. Personally, I really like TASM 1, even if it can be a little bit slow on a rewatch, and while I think TASM 2 has its moments, it still resembles more of a string of studio-mandated reshoots than it does a cohesive film. But Andrew Garfield's Peter and Emma Stone's Gwen were definitely a large reason why the movies were as big as they were. Outside of the Spider-Man fandom, that is not really a hot take, but the Spider-Man fandom is a decentralized nursery of raccoons on a battlefield, constantly mad at each other. So if you don't like that, just, I don't know, yell at me in the comments or something. TASM 1 came out in 2012, and TASM 2 came out the same year as Edge of Spider-Verse number 2 in 2014, so I have no doubt that the high profile of the movies at the time impacted the explosive debut of Gwen 65. In 2015, Emma Stone even expressed interest in portraying Spider-Gwen in future projects. She did acknowledge that she only passively knew of the character, but even her mentioning the fan cast, can you even call it a fan cast if she's already playing Gwen, definitely elevated the profile of the comic character. I think this could still work today. It might be a bit of a stretch to see Emma Stone today playing a college kid, but not by that much. Although I do think it would make more sense for a younger actress to portray Gwen in like the MCU or the SPUMC. The SPUMC, of course, being the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters. I know they renamed it, I do not care. Everyone and their mother has a random popular blonde teenaged actress as their Gwen 65 fan cast. Although, if we're being real, almost all of them are based more on them being blonde than if they'd actually be a good fit for the character of Gwen. I personally think it would be better to cast an unknown or relatively unknown for a live action Gwen, but then again, I would say that about practically any comic character. The Spectacular Spider-Man also definitely elevated Gwen's popularity for a lot of the kids and the tweens of the aughts. Hey, I know that this interjection is already a little too long and rambly, but just let me talk about Spectacular Spider-Man. Gwen in Spectacular is very much based on Gwen in the Ultimate Comics, by which I actually mean she's based off of MJ in the Ultimate Comics, or 1610, because 1610's MJ and Gwen kind of had their personalities swapped a little bit. Ultimate MJ is a bit more bookish and nerdy and laid back than 1610 MJ, and all of her extroversion and spunk was given to Gwen, though in more of like an angsty, mysterious, edgelord goth sort of way, rather than in a party girl, supermodel kind of way, because it was the aughts. This means that Spectacular Gwen is based off of 1610 MJ, who is based on 616 Gwen, though in a more exaggerated sense, I don't know, this is all a game of adaptational telephone. And speaking of adaptational telephone, I know this is unrelated to literally the rest of the video, but MCU MJ should have just been Mary Jane Watson from the get-go. I will never understand the decision to hire fucking Zendaya Coleman of all people to play MJ, then not having her act or present as Mary Jane Watson when she can 100% pull it off. Like, imagine a straightforward adaptation of Mary Jane Watson, played by Zendaya. She would have totally nailed that. We were fucking robbed. Okay, I am fully off topic at this point and ranting. It is 1 a.m. on a work day, so I'm gonna go to sleep, and you guys are gonna continue watching the video. Or else. Similarly, I won't break down Edge of Spider-Verse number 2 shot for shot, because if you've seen Across the Spider-Verse, you basically already have the story. Seriously, Across the Spider-Verse nearly perfectly translates this issue into a larger multiversal plot. And it's really cool to see such a straightforward adaptation from page to screen while still utilizing unique visuals and changing things around appropriately to fit into a larger narrative. A lot of what makes those early Spider-Gwen titles work is Gwen's relationship with her father, a now retired cop trying to navigate the world after Gwen's new identity as a vigilante fundamentally changes his worldview, and he tries to connect with his daughter on a more personal level. To return to that Jason Latour interview, quote, I am a fairly liberal guy who was raised by very loving but conservative parents. So a lot of my life has been trying to wrestle with what the things are that I disagree with them in terms of their ideology. But there are a lot of things they taught me that I carry with me every day and have found valuable. In that sense, Gwen and I are one and the same. Gwen is really wrestling with this idea that her father has this black and white view of the world. He's a good cop, but at the end of the day, his job is to put on a badge and shield and to try to proactively protect people. The inverse of that is, because he knows she's Spider-Woman, that everything he knows about his life has been called into question. She's really the headliner, but Captain Stacy is really the A1 supporting cast member. It's like anyone's parents, really. This is very fitting for a very punk rock inspired take on the larger Marvel universe, as that core idea of making Gwen a drummer in a rock band sets a very clear tone and message for the aesthetics and intricacies of Gwen's world versus mainline continuity. This is where we get into one of my first problems with a lot of newer Spider-Gwen stories. A lot of writers seem to be under the impression that her core concept is what if Gwen Stacy was Spider-Man, rather than the more apt mission statement of what if Spider-Man was Riot Girl. The origin of Spider-Gwen was told in a single page of her debut issue, with most of the comic focusing on her strained relationship with her father. Everything you need to know about Gwen 65 is conveyed here. She was bitten by a radioactive spider, got powers, Peter became the lizard, Gwen may have killed Peter, Gwen becomes angsty, yada yada, you get the picture. From there on, Gwen would get her own mini-series from the minds of Latour and Rodriguez that would later be extended into a full ongoing. Both of them would expand on Gwen's world by making a universe that felt very influenced by the aesthetics of punk rock and the feminist core of the Riot Girl movement, reimagining classic Marvel characters into a more contemporary setting while keeping some characters pretty much the same. While characters like the Vulture stick pretty close to their mainline counterpart, also get characters like Samantha Wilson, a kick-ass female Captain America who eats nachos off of her shield. The most iconic reinvention of the Spider-Gwen line is no doubt Earth 65's iteration of Matthew Murdock, who in this reality becomes the Kingpin. In this reality, Matt was much more brutal and ended up killing the hand soldiers that killed his father, impressing the organization and causing them to raise Matt within the ranks of the Hand. Now Matt is both the crime kingpin of New York as well as the head of the Hand, creating a very compelling villain for Gwen to fight against. The creativity of Earth 65's versions of the characters definitely dwindled as the books went on, eventually causing Gwen to jump ship to Earth 616. But we'll get to that later, just put a pin in it. A common criticism early on was that Gwen's stories were too similar to Peter's, and while characters like Miles had a different power set to distinguish him from the other Spider-Men, or where Mayday Parker had a specific niche of being an exploration of Peter Parker's legacy, Gwen just seemed to be doing much of the same stuff that Peter was involved in. In my opinion, the tone and aesthetics of the book were enough to differentiate Gwen's stories from the rest of the Spider Office. However, this criticism would be somewhat directly addressed during the book's run during the Spider-Woman crossover event. During this multiverse hopping crossover with Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman and Cindy Moon Silk, Gwen actually loses her powers and starts relying on a synthetic serum to create a bit more tension within the book, leading to a lot of angst over whether it was still worth it to be Spider-Woman. Angst was only further amplified when Gwen started using a symbiote to regain her powers. This universe's symbiote goes more along the lines of the ultimate version of Venom, being a synthetic material created by morally dubious scientists that takes on a life of its own. And for a really cool visual, the symbiote in this universe is made up of tiny spiders, which is sick as hell. The angst and rage is really part of what endears many people to Spider-Gwen. It's exploring those anxieties and neuroses that draw so many people to the Spider family of characters in the first place. Through all of the Spider-Woman antics, Gwen has to do the classic Spidey juggling act of balancing her superhero life with her personal life. This mostly manifests in her conflict with constantly bailing on her bandmates, the members of the Mary Janes, a punk rock band headed by, you guessed it, her universe's version of Mary Jane Watson, and is comprised of alternate universe versions of the other women of the Spider-Man supporting cast. In addition to Gwen on the drums and MJ as lead vocals and the lead guitarist, you'll also have Gloria Grant on the keyboard, and Betty Brant as the team's bassist. Also in this universe, MJ is dating Gloria Grant, and it is lightly implied early on and heavily implied later on that there are feelings between Gwen and MJ, which further explains the bitterness behind Gwen always missing rehearsals a little bit more. But that also feels like a separate discussion. Again, these more personal sections of Gwen's stories are very much held together by Gwen's strained relationship with her father as she navigates young adulthood in this nebulous older than 17 stage of her life. Side note, yes, this does mean that Gwen was 18 to 20 during this time of her life. And yes, Miles Morales was nebulously a little older or younger than 14 to 15-ish. And yes, this is also the time frame during which the infamous sitting in a tree story arc happened, where Gwen kissed Miles. Yes, this is all very weird. No, we are not dwelling on it. Moving on. Gwen's Venom arc not only shows us a kick-ass symbiote design, but it delves deeper and deeper into the darkness and anxieties of this version of Gwen. So deep, in fact, that Latour and Rodriguez needed to include the Watcher to assure us that all of this angst is leading to somewhere, and will have a satisfying conclusion. And for the most part, it does. The ending of the second volume of Spider-Gwen is actually pretty great. After delving deep into the darkness of Gwenom, Gwen actually learns to live with that darkness, to let it resonate with her. She doesn't even get rid of the symbiote. She embraces her anxieties as part of her. She achieves true mutual symbiosis, and that actually carries through with the character to the modern day. Most people don't realize this. Gwen still uses the symbiote to this day. She's just walking around with a suit made of spiders. Gwen has one final confrontation with Matt Murdock and beats him in a way that's really thematic to the core of her character and the conceit of her universe. You can probably put two and two together, but I don't want to explicitly spell it out because these initial 39 issues are really great and the best Spider-Gwen has ever been in the comics. So I do really recommend you seek out the series and read it yourself. I've left out a ton of details and plot threads in this retelling, and I haven't even touched on some key players. This universe's Reed Richards, the Cindy Moon of Earth 65, Frank Castle, or this badass amalgamation of Kitty Pryde and Laura Kinney that doesn't really have a lot to do with the overall plot, But I have to mention Laura Kinney at least once a video. Oh, and Gwen is also featured in a Freaky Friday story in the all-new Wolverine annual, so there. 2 Laura Kinney mentions. Sue me. It's the aftermath of the battle that causes some serious problems for the future of the character. Gwen, feeling guilty for all the damage and hurt she's caused, goes to the Daily Bugle and reveals her identity to the world. Now, this is very in line with her characterization up to this point and is the natural direction of this storyline. And we got some powerful moments before the fight of Gwen revealing her identity to her friends and to May and Ben Parker. However, not having the dual identity does create some issues in the future that the writer of the next series, Seanan McGuire, seems to have had some trouble writing around. Gwen would go on to feature in a few crossover titles before starting her 2018 series, which is where we need to talk about another problem I have with Spider-Gwen. This series was starting a few months before Into the Spider-Verse, starting in October 2018, while the movie would release that December. This is when Marvel realized they had a branding problem with the character. While editorially she was referred to as Spider-Gwen, was referred to in-universe as Spider-Woman. This leads to a couple of marketing problems. Gwen is about to become one of the co-leads of a huge Spider-Verse franchise, one that she was already in the talks of a spin-off for. When marketing a Spider-Woman film, it'll be hard to sell 5 different posters that all say Spider-Woman. So it's good to give at least some of them unique monikers. Spider-Bite, Sun Spider, Silk. But you run into the problem of when. If in-universe she's Spider-Woman, most people know her as Spider-Gwen. What do you call her? And also, this new solo title would see Gwen hopping to Earth 616, a universe where everyone and their mother is already named Spider-Woman, some of whom are barely related to Spider-Man. And thus, we arrive at the title of this new series for Gwen. Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider. Gwen finally had a unique moniker that wasn't just her first name. A couple months later, and we finally get Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a multiverse story with Gwen as a primary supporting character. I don't need to tell you how good this movie is because just look at it. It practically redefined the medium. Sure, the techniques that blended 2D and 3D animation did have their genesis in the earlier movies, like Peanuts or Captain Underpants, but this was the movie with this style that had huge critical acclaim, beating out 2 Disney movies and a Wes Anderson for the 2019 Best Animated Movie Oscar, and ended up making 4 times its budget at the box office. Suddenly, Spider-Gwen was a household name, and the fan art and cosplays that rocketed her to success were back in full swing. Not only was Gwen now more popular than ever with general audiences, she was also highly marketable, which means that Gwen's time in comics would be far, far from over after her 2018 run ended. Gwen was here to stay. Now, you may have noticed that I have not been calling Gwen Ghost Spider throughout this video. There's a reason for that. I'm not a fan of the Ghost Spider name. Don't get me wrong, it makes sense on a meta-textual level. You and I both know that Gwen Stacy is famously the Spider-Man love interest that died, ergo, being alive makes her a ghost. But the residents of Earth 616 don't know that, and neither do the residents of Earth 65. On top of that, Gwen doesn't have any notably ghost-related powers. She can't turn invisible like Miles.
This kid can turn himself invisible. Watch this. He can do it now.
I can't do it on command.
He can't do it on command.
She doesn't have Kitty Pryde abilities. The name Ghost Spider comes off as some weird, morbid inside joke between the Spider people. The thing is, I can't even think of a better name. Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider is just catchy to say. Speaking of ghosts that don't make sense, in this new series, to circumvent that whole everyone in Earth 65 knows Gwen issue, This new series, written by Seanan McGuire, has Gwen going back and forth between Earth 65 and 616 to attend Empire State University, taking classes under Peter, who's a TA there, and continuing her college education. I'm not one to poke holes in the story of things, but that's weird, right? In real life history, Gwen has been dead for decades, but in universe, Gwen has only been dead for like, what, 7, 8 years, 10 max? You're telling me that no one at this college had Gwen Stacy as a student and sees this girl with the same face, same name, same overall appearance as the student who was killed by the Green Goblin around her current age, and no one goes, hey, that's weird? I mean, it's definitely not the case that everyone somehow forgot, because Miles Warren hasn't. Miles Warren is a big player in this book's second half, which is just retitled to Ghost Spider, because Marvel was going crazy with renumbering stories mid-run at this time for some reason. The second half, the McGuire run, is fine. It plays with Gwen having her identity revealed and the consequences, but nothing earth-shattering happens. Much of the same is true of the second half. We get about 5 issues of the Jackal being obsessed with Gwen, and then another 5 where we get a promising return to Earth 65 with some antagonistic reinventions of Sue and Johnny Storm. And then the whole thing ended in a bit of an unsatisfactory note. You may have noticed I'm not delving nearly as deeply into the McGuire run as the original run. That's because I don't find it nearly as compelling as those original 39 issues. No hate to McGuire and crew, but this was the last full run on Gwen that I have read, especially because of what she would become. After this, Gwen got a 3-issue tie-in to the King in Black event. During this tie-in, Mary Jane gains access to a Carnage symbiote, and Gwen's Venom symbiote is largely not connected to the rest of the hive mind of the Clintar and the rest of the events in Kenan Black. I would explain Kenan Black a little bit so that sentence would make more sense, but this video is getting long enough as it is. What you basically need to know is that Mary Jane is Carnage, she flirts with Gwen, and this entire thing is just kind of shipping fuel for the Mary Jane Gwen ship. At this point, we need to walk it back a little bit. After Gwen initially started exploding in popularity, Marvel saw the success of dressing Gwen up as the flagship Marvel character, and decided to capitalize off of that success the best way Marvel knows how: selling gimmick variant covers. For those of you uninitiated to the comic book space, a variant cover is an alternative cover separate from the main design for a comic, used to give various comic artists a space to shine. Comic covers can vary wildly from the art style of the book's interior, and typically have an artistic interpretation of the events of the book. Variant covers are often not dictated by the events of the book. They can often depict characters and scenes that have absolutely nothing to do with the interior story of the book or the franchise the book is set in at all. Every now and again, Marvel will hire a slate of artists to create a series of covers unified under one gimmick, as a bit of a sales push to try to get speculators and readers to pay a little bit extra for an extra piece of art to display inside of their closed lawn box that they keep in the basement. To popularize off of Gwen's success, Marvel decided to dedicate a full summer's worth of variant covers to Gwenify other popular Marvel characters. The breakout star of this slate of covers was a reinterpretation of Deadpool, affectionately named Gwenpool. The cover was so successful that it spun off into an entire character within the pages of Marvel itself. Meet Gwenpool, canonically a late teenaged girl from quote-unquote the real world, who is neither an alternate version of Gwen Stacy nor a character based off of Deadpool, nor having his powers. Instead, she has a near encyclopedic knowledge of her favorite comic characters and plot lines as a result of being a comic book stan from the real world who spends way too much of her free time reading comics. As her series goes on, Poole discovers that she has reality warping powers, allowing her to go between the panels, utilizing the comic medium as a form of time travel and reality manipulation, looking ahead and going back in time to retcon events of her own story. It's later speculated that she's not from the real world and instead used her reality warping powers to gaslight herself into thinking she was. Either that, or she's a powerless 20-something with no actual powers. Gwenpool is very confusing, and we don't have time to dwell on all of that. But my point is, this is a character that started as a marketing gimmick and then blossomed into a fully formed, complex character with her own fanbase and storylines. There's even a really touching storyline in the recent Love Unlimited series on Marvel Unlimited, where Gwen explored the possibility of a queer relationship before struggling with intimacy and realizing she's aromantic and asexual. This is a fun contrast to Deadpool being canonically pansexual. It's really touching and a true testament to how powerful her character can be. It's just a shame that Spider-Gwen shared the opposite trajectory. After her 2020 series, Gwen became a bit of a marketing gimmick. She started getting paraded out to promote large crossover events, and her two most recent series look like attempts to sell covers of Gwen Stacy dressed as various Marvel characters. Again, I have not kept up with those, so maybe they do have some really good stories in there. I just haven't given them a try yet. As I mentioned earlier, this year we saw the release of Across the Spider-Verse, and Gwen is not only back in the spotlight, but she's given an even bigger role in this story than the first movie. Hell, the first 15 minutes alone are dedicated just to her. This movie does Gwen justice in a phenomenal way. Not only does she have a dope costume and an emotional arc, but this time around, Gwen is awkward. She's anxious.
Are you,
Oh, this? We don't know the sex yet. My husband wants it to be a surprise. He's really corny, but so hot.
will you adopt me?
What?
She fidgets, she talks with her hands, she's neurotic, she trips over her words, and she cringes at her own comments and jokes. Finally, we have an on-screen adaptation of Gwen 65 that is a girl fail. Now, there is an important aspect of the discussion surrounding Gwen in this movie that we have to talk about. In Gwen's bedroom, there's a trans pride flag with the words, "Protect Trans Kids," hung above her door, framed prominently in the scene too. When I first saw this in the trailer, I figured it would get airbrushed out overseas. But to my pleasant surprise, the animators stood their ground and refused to remove it from the scene, allowing the entire movie to get banned in several overseas countries over the flag. I'm happy that the animation team took a stand rather than other companies who are more than happy to censor their own films if it means earning a few extra dollars in the foreign markets. Some have pointed out that even most allies wouldn't normally have such a flag so prominently displayed in their bedroom, and Gwen's dad even has a trans pride flag on his policeman's jacket. Additionally, Gwen's dimension changes color based on her emotions, and when she has an impassioned discussion of her identity as Spider-Woman to her father, the colors of the room change to similarly reflect the trans pride colors. Many have taken these clues to speculate that Gwen's story may be more than just a trans allegory, and that Gwen herself might be transgendered. Trans readings of Gwen's stories are not unique to this movie and this iteration of her character. Gwens have been joking about this possibility for years. To that I say, hell yeah. If Gwen is trans, then that would be dope and a huge win for representation. And if the possibility of a fictional teenager being trans makes you irrationally angry, please get the fuck off of my channel. I will not be tolerating harassment in my comment section. Across the Spider-Verse is a beautiful film, and while learning about the unfair labor practices behind this movie does tarnish the magic a little bit, it's still a wildly fun movie that has me waiting with bated breath for the sequel. I am willing to bait my breath for how long it takes for us to wait. So, what's next for Gwen? Obviously, there's Beyond the Spider-Verse, but apparently Haley Steinfeld hasn't even recorded lines for the sequel yet. And while the actual animation work isn't currently struck, the fact that the majority of their cast are SAG actors obviously slows things down. And obviously, I would support any unionization and strike efforts of the animation industry that would otherwise slow production down. Hi, editing Eric here again. I'm not even going to edit down the audio for this part because I'm so close to finishing this video. But the strike is over, and Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to resume the voice acting. It's still in question if that even started to begin with, but this is cool. This is dope. So progress on the movie can finally get started again, unless the Animation Guild decides to keep Hot to Labor Summer going, and they decide to strike. But for now, it looks like they're still on track to make a undetermined release date. So, yeah, I don't know how to transition out of this. In terms of the comics, recent Marvel solicitations have listed a new comic for the interdimensional wall crawler, Spider-Gwen Smash. Weird name aside, the story is helmed by Melissa Flores on the writing and Enid Balaam on the art. Billed as the Mary Janes go on tour, the premise is that the Mary Janes are opening for Dazzler's North American tour, and while Gwen promises no superhero shenanigans, an attempted assassination ruins those plans. The return to Earth-65 makes me excited. This sounds like just the Spider-Gwen story you've been waiting for. Spider-Gwen Smash is solicited for a mid-December release. And speaking of variant covers, there's this Peach Momoko variant that I have to try to pre-order. Spider-Gwen is a great character. What may have seemed like a gimmick at first blossomed into a fascinating hero with a dedicated fan base. While she may have slipped a little towards the end, I hope Marvel regains their footing with Gwen and can bounce back and tap into all of the potential they're missing with her as a hero on Earth-65. Hey, you're now seeing my face, which means that this is the part of the video where I just tell you about my life. I think the video's done. I think it's finally done. I've been working on this for like 2 or 3 months on and off. There have been weeks that I didn't work on this at all, and there are weeks that I put tons of hours into this. Basically, the story behind that was I started writing and, well, not writing, but like seriously sitting down and recording and starting to edit this a week before Across the Spider-Verse came out on Blu-ray, and I thought, hey, I'll record this and I'll edit it together and it'll come out within like a week or two after this. I think that was back in August or September, one of the two. It is now November 11th. Well, it's like almost 1 a.m. November 11th. The story behind that is that Baldur's Gate 3 happened. I wasn't planning on getting it, and then it was like the night after a D&D session, and I was just like, fuck it, if I still want to get it in the morning, I'll buy it. Then I bought it, and now I have 80 hours in Act 1. I haven't gotten past Moonrise Towers yet. I'm like about to enter them. It's like at the point of a video game, right, where you get really invested in it, you try to do everything. Then you get to a certain point, and it's like a stopgap, and you just kind of have to push yourself through the stopgap, if that makes sense. But Baldur's Gate 3 was not the only reason this got delayed. A few weeks later, got really back into my FNAF phase, Five Nights at Freddy's, because the movie was coming out. And I decided to do this fun little project, right? Where I would draw every major Five Nights at Freddy's character. There are 90 characters in here. They're like pretty simple, except for the ones that aren't. Like, okay, so you have like Toy Freddy, who's just a potato of rectangles, and then you also have Nightmare Freddy, who is just an abomination. That was a project that I did while I was also working on this. I think part of what motivated me to like really sit down and finish editing this video was that Spider-Man 2 came out, and even though I don't have a PS5 and I'm gonna have to wait like 4-5 years to actually play that game when it eventually gets ported to PC. But yeah, even though I'm not going to be able to play it, I've watched some Twitch streams. I've been watching through Snapcube's playthrough a little bit, and it looks really fun, and it sort of reinvigorated my Spider-Man hype. Thanks for joining me on this video. I know it's definitely longer than my previous ones. I don't know what my next video is gonna be. I floated the Kindred idea. I want to save that for a subscriber goal if this becomes like a thing. I also kind of want to make like a complete history of Laura Kinney video, but that would be like multi-hours long, going into multiple 20+ issue runs. That would also probably be a subscriber goal, with just the sheer volume of shit I'd have to reread for that, because I have read almost every single Laura Kinney appearance, but I think I still have like 40 issues left, and those are just like the Bendis issues mainly. That's all. If you have ideas for videos, drop them down in the comments. I might take some of your suggestions. Follow me on TikTok at Eric I Guess, and also on the League of Comic Geeks app. I'm at Eric I Guess. I'm also on Blue Sky, so just like contact me if you want a Blue Sky code. And those are really the only 3 social medias I have left, so I'm plugging those. Thank you for joining me. If you liked this video, then leave a like if you like. Free Palestine, and I'll see you next time.